Welcome back. Are you ready to start the show? What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I hope you are all doing great today. So first of all, I know that it is almost 3 months into the new year and I have not posted a single video, which I am very sorry about. But regardless, on December 5th, we finally got the long-awaited horror sequel, Five Nights at Freddy's 2. And this was probably my most anticipated movie ever, honestly. Not just of 2025, but I don't think I had ever been so excited to see a movie. I literally could not shut up about this thing for months before it came out. So naturally, I went to go see it at an early screening on December 4th, and then the next couple days, I was actually off to GalaxyCon Columbus, where I got to meet Matthew Lillard and Skeet Ulrich. Which was incredibly exciting because if you've been watching my channel for a while, you probably know that Matthew Lillard is my absolute hero. But boring history aside, I decided that even though it might be 2.5 months late, I'm still going to review this movie. Let's start off with the things that I liked about this movie because there are quite a few of them. First of all, just like the first movie, the animatronics look absolutely incredible. And this time there are so many more of them. We get to see the toy animatronics, the withered animatronics, Balloon Boy, Mangle. And once again, Jim Henson's Creature Shop knocked it out of the park. They look just like they did in the games and just have such an amazing look to them. My favorite of which would have to be Mangle, who I heard actually had up to 13 puppeteers when this movie was being made. And seeing this character come to life on screen was absolutely incredible. The marionette was also very impressive and provided probably the scariest scenes in the movie. And I also really enjoyed the voice acting for the toy animatronics done by Megan Fox, Kellen Goff, and MatPat himself, Matthew Patrick. I thought that all three of the voices actually fit the characters really well, and I was somebody who was very skeptical to see Megan Fox in a Five Nights at Freddy's movie, but luckily she actually did a great job.
Remember how I said we needed your help?
You left me to die.
My name is Bonnie.
Another big positive is that the acting is pretty solid all around. Josh Hutcherson and Piper Rubio are once again really great as Mike and Abby, but this movie actually focuses a little more on Vanessa, played by Elizabeth Lail. And I'm happy to say that I was actually more impressed with Elizabeth Lail's performance this time around, because in the first movie she wasn't bad by any means, but I felt like she could have done a little bit more to give it 110%, if you know what I mean. But this movie actually did give her some time to shine, and I think that she did a pretty decent job. Of course, Matthew Lillard is also great as William Afton. Every scene he is in, he absolutely steals the show. And unfortunately, he wasn't in the movie that much, which is one of the negatives that we'll get into later. But when he was in the movie, he was amazing. We also got a couple new characters, one of them being Henry Emily, played by Skeet Ulrich. And I think that Skeet Ulrich also gave it his all in this movie. He was very, very good. We also got to see Michael Afton, played by Freddy Carter. And this guy was honestly terrifying. I thought he was definitely a great choice to play the character, and he's also a classic example of a British actor who's doing an American accent. And when I first watched the movie, I did not know he was British. That's how good his American accent was. Wayne Knight is also in this movie, and despite the fact that his character is pretty cartoonishly evil and kind of ridiculous at times, Wayne Knight is just such a fun actor, and it's cool to see him in something like this. Another thing is that this movie was a little bit scarier than the first one, and that was a pretty common critique, that it just wasn't scary enough, there wasn't enough action, there wasn't enough animatronic carnage. And even though I don't think that this movie is quite as scary or action-packed as the cast and crew were making it out to be, it is still kicked up a notch from the first movie, and I do appreciate that. The set design in this movie is also very, very impressive. The pizzeria looks incredible, and the security office is literally a one-to-one replica with the game, which is so cool to see. And speaking of the security office, they actually found a really cool way to incorporate the gameplay of the second game into the movie. I'm not going to go into too much detail about how they do it, but they do manage to make it so that it fits with the story that they're trying to tell, while also being something that they snuck in for fans to be like, oh my god, he's playing the second game. That's awesome. And the final thing that I will say for the positives is that the opening scene in this movie is honestly fantastic. It wastes no time getting into the origin story of Charlotte, who is a very important character in this movie. It shows the day that she was killed by William Afton and nobody was there to help her. And there's a really cool reference to the game where the marionette rises up with Charlotte in her arms, which is a pretty direct reference to a line that was said in the 6th game by Henry Emily.
No one was there to lift you up into their arms, the way you lifted others into yours.
But the first scene is honestly just so tense and well done, and it's one of the few times that we actually get to see Matthew Lillard as the Yellow Rabbit in all of his horrifying glory. So those are the positives, but unfortunately this movie does have a few negatives, so let's talk about them. And the biggest negative that I have with this movie is honestly the story. At times the story really does feel very messy, and it kind of feels like they had a whole bunch that they wanted to do, but they didn't have too much time to do it. This movie is an hour and 44 minutes long, which is actually about 6 minutes shorter than the first movie. But with everything that they tried to cram in this movie, I felt like it needed to be at least 2 hours long. And I have got a super low attention span, so that is one of the only times that you are going to hear me say that a movie should have been longer. So even though there's a lot of great stuff in this movie, like the animatronics, William Afton, new characters, it unfortunately does not focus on a lot of those things for long enough. Skeet Ulrich has one scene in this movie, plus a little audio recording at the end. So even though he did an amazing job and I really liked his character, we didn't get to know that much about him, and it feels like his scenes were really cut short. Same thing with Freddy Carter from Michael Afton. He showed up for a little bit towards the beginning of the movie, and then he didn't show up again until the end. Which is a similar thing that they did with William Afton in the first movie, and it honestly just does not work to have a character come in for a little bit, and then at the end he turns out to be the villain. And then of course there's the fact that Matthew Lillard had probably up to 3 minutes of screen time max. And look, he was underused in the first movie, but I was hoping that this film would do a lot more with William Afton and explore his backstory and everything like that. And we got a little tiny bit of that, but seriously, he is not in this movie very much, and it honestly pisses me off. And that's not just because I'm such a big fan of Matthew Lillard, that is because they are underusing their main villain so much. And even though the animatronics in this movie are amazing, the only one that gets a fair amount of screen time is Toy Chica. If you're going into this movie expecting to see a whole bunch of Withered Bonnie, Balloon Boy, Mangle, all those iconic characters from Five Nights at Freddy's 2, then prepare to be a little bit disappointed because you do see them, but not for that long. And instead of spending a lot of time on things that we want to see more of, we spend a lot of time at a school science fair. We don't want to see a school science fair. We want to see William Afton. We want to see the Withered animatronics. We want to know more about Henry Emily. We want to know more about Michael Afton. Something that's kind of ironic was that in the first movie, a lot of people complained that there were too many dream sequences. But in this movie, Vanessa has one dream sequence, and it's one of the best scenes in the movie. I wanted to see more dream sequences that explore more about Vanessa and William's relationship. And I guess you could say that if my biggest negative with this movie was that there's a lot of good things that I wanted to see more of, then that's pretty good. But unfortunately, this comes more from the fact that the story is just very convoluted and messy. Which I will say is pretty accurate to the games, but this is a film, you gotta make it flow a little bit better. I honestly really respect the fact that Scott Cawthon wrote the script on his own, because letting the creator of the game be the sole writer of the movie is something that a lot of studios just won't do. It's something that they didn't do for the first movie either. But unfortunately, it is pretty obvious that Scott is not the most experienced writer, and he does have a little bit of work to do. But overall, guys, even though this movie does have flaws, I still did really enjoy it as a big Five Nights at Freddy's fan. If you're not a Five Nights at Freddy's fan, this movie is definitely not for you, as we can clearly see by it having a 16% on Rotten Tomatoes. But if you are a big Five Nights at Freddy's fan, I think that there is a lot for you to enjoy here, and I think they did a pretty decent job making another movie that was really made for the fans of the game. Even though they did change some things that make it not exactly guaranteed that every single fan of the game is going to be a big fan of the movie. But overall, guys, if you're a Five Nights at Freddy's fan, you have already seen this movie. You don't need me to tell you to go watch it. But personally, I did really enjoy it, and I'm going to give it a solid 8 out of 10. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to support what I do further. Take care, and I'll see you next time.